So hi everybody. Thank you all for tuning in and joining. I'm Jonathan Kalb. Most of you probably know me because if you're here, you're probably students in our department, but some of you may not. And I'm thrilled to be here with this really cool group of people who have brought a project to us that I already knew about because I wear two hats in this discussion. I am a faculty member and probably the teacher of some of you, but I'm also the resident dramaturg at a theater in Brooklyn called Theater for a New Audience, which partners with this organization, CLASSIX, in its own way. And so I was the natural person to moderate this discussion. We're here today to introduce you to all of these people and to this project, CLASSIX, which is with an X. And I think that that's as much as I should say now, because my role is not as a member of CLASSIX, but as a moderator of a discussion whose purpose is to introduce you to all of these people and to the project. So what I would like to do is just start by turning to Wed One, who came up with this idea and who is its leader, and ask her to give a general introduction to the thing. So Awoye, a welcome to you and welcome to everyone.
Yes, thank you. And hi, everybody. I wish we could all be in person and feel each other's energy, but we're just so happy and overjoyed to be with you today and to be able to chat about CLASSIX. We get together once a week and have meetings and get to just enjoy each other's company. So I'm also very excited for you all just to meet the tremendous crew that makes up the CLASSIX team. And maybe what I'll do to start is we'll just do a kind of quick round of introductions of who we are, and then I can give a little intro on CLASSIX and how it came to be. So I'm Awoye Timpo, and I'm a director and a producer here in New York. I'm in Brooklyn right now, and mostly working on developing new plays, but also looking at the classical canon. And I'm gonna toss it to Arminda.
Hi, thanks, Awoye. I'm Arminda Thomas. I'm a dramaturg and archivist and a few other things sometimes. And I am just thrilled to be here and to have joined up with this team. And I'm going to toss it to AJ.
Hi, everybody. I'm AJ Muhammad, and I'm one of the producers on the CLASSIX team. I'm also a dramaturg as well as Arminda and Dominique. And I also work as a librarian at the Schomburg Center and Research in Black Culture. I'm a librarian in the Research and Reference Division, and I'm also on the producing team of an organization called the Fire This Time Festival, which is an annual theater festival that presents the work of emerging and underappreciated playwrights from the African diaspora. And I wanted to thank Hunter College for inviting us to have this conversation, and I'm going to pass it over to Brittany.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Bradford. I am an actor, sometimes director, sometimes producer, and a member of the CLASSIX team based in New York. And I will toss it to Dominique.
Hey everybody, I'm Dominique. I'm a director, dramaturg, and I moonlight as an academic on the right days. I'm coming to you live from Brooklyn, just like Awoye, giving you all the Haitian energy I got. So glad to be here.
That's right. That's amazing. So I'll kind of give you the background of how CLASSIX got to be, and I'll see if I can add in some fun new details for the CLASSIX team who have heard me talk about the history so many times. But basically, the journey for me started back in, I guess, now 2016. I was working on an incredible musical as the assistant director called Shuffle Along, which was a Broadway musical that was kind of a retelling of the making of the Broadway musical sensation Shuffle Along from 1921 that was directed by the incomparable George Wolfe. And we were having a conversation, and he had mentioned a number of playwrights and said, oh, hey, have you ever read these plays by these two writers? And one of them was a woman named Kathleen Collins, and another was a gentleman named Bill Gunn, who were both writing. They both passed away toward the end of the 80s. But I had never heard of the playwrights or the plays that he mentioned. So I went out and was looking for them and had a tricky time of finding them. The Bill Gunn play had last been produced in 1989. And I was able to find a copy of it in one of the public libraries. And then the Kathleen Collins book was published. The play was published in a collection of plays called 9 Plays by Black Women. So I was looking around trying to find that book and play, finally was able to find them and read these two plays and was like, these writers are so incredible, poetic. The artists themselves, they were both screenwriters and short story writers and playwrights. And it just got me thinking about having not been introduced to their work prior to George telling me about them. It got me really looking on a search of what are other plays by Black playwrights that I don't know or that I haven't read. And so I started reaching out to people and finding out what are plays that they had read, what are plays that they had loved, what are plays that they had worked on, what are plays that they have developed that they were like, oh my gosh, I would love to see this play revived somewhere or to be able to revisit it in some kind of way. And so it started a journey and a search for me about looking at and exploring the Black classical canon beyond the fantastic, phenomenal greatness of the work of Lorraine Hansberry and August Wilson. And so it also just led me to other people who were kind of equally inspired by Black plays and Black writers. And so Arminda and I had worked on a play out in the Bay Area last year. And so we started talking. I'd been talking to Dominique about just life as a director, and we kind of found a shared kind of history and love of this canon. Brittany and I met and were conspiring on different projects, and we're like, oh, we should continue to talk about these plays. AJ and I had worked together, and I knew his own kind of brilliance and encyclopedic knowledge of the canon as well. And so we all started to gather and come together and really think about how we can celebrate the canon and also celebrate the work of so many scholars and artists who have come before us who have been doing the work of celebrating the canon for so long. So that's kind of how it started out. And now it's kind of beautiful. It's grown to kind of focus on what we call 4 different pillars. So the first pillar is readings and productions. How are we kind of creating space for readings of the plays, both in New York and all around the country? How do we collaborate with theater companies to produce productions of the play? There's an education pillar, which is about how are we telling stories about the play inside of our educational institutions? How do we continue to map these plays into the curriculum at different schools so that students can have access to them, so that as people are thinking about, oh, what productions do we want to do this season, that they're thinking about these plays as well. There's a narrative pillar, which is all about, again, how are we telling stories about these plays? And we can tell you a little bit more about a podcast that we're building that fits under this pillar. And then the final pillar is publication. So some of the plays that are hardest to find, how do we create new documents that are easily accessible to people? And also, how do we take some of the writers that we're really excited about and would like to celebrate and say, oh, what would it mean for us to publish a new kind of edition of that person's plays, and including some kind of additional scholarly work and scholarship about these plays and the legacy of these plays. So that's our goal at CLASSIX, and we've been having a great time. I mean, for me, it's just like every day with this group of people is just such a beautiful learning experience. I feel like we're all learning together and growing together, and so it's been a really great journey. So we're just really overjoyed and thrilled to be able to connect with you all today. Did I leave it? Did I leave it
Would it be helpful to share screen and show your very cool brand new live website, or do you want to do that at another that happen? But you tell me when.
No, I think that's a great idea.
Is it because you know, since we're all live, I can go on and you it. Let me. I can just get there.
This is very
Okay,
exciting.
how's that?
Mm-hmm.
So now you have your home page and you can just tell me where to go. I can scroll down.
Yeah, beautiful. So this is you guys are getting actually a very special treat. We have just revamped the website and it has gone live today. Basically our real hope and goal is that this website can serve as a resource for anybody who is thinking about wanting to know more about the Black classical canon, that this can be a place where you come, you can ask questions, you can sit for hours and browse through it and just, you know, just learn. So basically you'll see we have a short description of what CLASSIX is, and I hope that you all will get some time to just browse through on your own time. And Jonathan, if you scroll down, the other really beautiful thing I think inside of
Tell us about the photos.
Yes, exactly, is all these incredible photographs from different eras and times in Black theater history. Now, as we continue to grow the website, one of the main features is going to be a catalog. And so each of these photos that you see here, you'll be able to click on the photo and it'll take you to a description of the play, of the playwright, where you can access the play. And yes, a living library of rarely seen Black classic plays. And Jonathan, if you scroll down a little bit, everybody can see the pillars that I outlined, the 4 pillars. Readings and production, education, narrative, and publication. Jonathan, if you go to the catalog page, the link at the top of the page, this is
one here.
It's actually, if you scroll way to the tippy top, and then on the right hand side, it'll say, yeah, the catalog. If you click on that, you see that?
I clicked.
Mm-hmm. So basically the catalog page is going to be a place where we're building a searchable catalog. So there might be a play, you know, someone might say to you, oh, have you ever read this play, The Big White Fog? That you'll be able to go search for Big White Fog, learn about the author, learn about the production history, find out where you can get the script, and also find out what the kind of situation currently is with the rights in case that you wanted to produce the play. So you can all kind of take some time and browse around. Our contact information is there. Our Instagram and Twitter is there. And if you all follow It's the CLASSIX on Twitter and on Instagram, starting tomorrow, we're going to be launching these kind of like beautiful biographies of a number of artists in Black theater history. So it'll be a really kind of fun series to follow along. But yeah, it's exciting. I personally, I think it looks so good. I feel like I just like to dig around in there.
It looks fantastic. It really does.
Thank you.
A place I should go, just since we're tooling around in here.
I think that's it. I would love maybe if I could toss.
Click on one of the authors, maybe.
Oh yeah, you know what? If you scroll down and click on Kathleen Collins.
Yeah.
So these 4 authors, when we did the first series of CLASSIX readings that we ever did, these are the 4 writers that we highlighted. And so Kathleen Collins, as we say, was just a tremendous playwright, but also a screenwriter. And if you get the chance to check out her film, Losing Ground, definitely check it out. It's so beautiful. And one of our other authors that we've mentioned here, Bill Gunn, is also featured in that film. So the goal, as I say, of the catalog is to be able to find out information about the play, but also information about the writer. And then we'll also include some additional resources. So here you can see both where you can find the play. There's a really beautiful and incredible interview with Kathleen Collins, so that is mentioned there. But yeah, our goal really is just for it to become a great kind of just a resource for everybody as they're doing just learning and thinking about other plays that they would like to incorporate into their work or into just their lives. CLASSIX team, is there anything I haven't mentioned that's important about the website or about the work we're doing? No? I might toss one of the really exciting projects that we're developing right now is a podcast that's going to cover 5 different eras of Black theater history. So I would love to toss it to Brittany to tell us a little bit about the podcast that we're building.
Sure.
Well, maybe I'll let Brittany have a little more screen space and stop the share here. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Dominique, please also jump in if I'm forgetting anything. But essentially, it's super exciting, and we're in the midst of the research element of it all. But we're basically looking with this podcast to explore different moments of Black theater history, whether those are moments that haven't really been examined fully or haven't been examined centering the Black voice. And we're looking at minstrelsy right now, specifically Black minstrelsy, looking at the people who created it, the people who started it, and really giving them full scope. And we're also looking at potentially in the future, experimental theater, ritual theater, the playwright Alice Childress, and so on. It's been really exciting for me as an actor because I remember, being in drama school and not really knowing a lot of these people, or not really knowing a lot of the history, and not knowing the shoulders on which I stand, basically. And it's really helped to give me some perspective and agency within my own career and my own perspective of what theater is. But Dominique or anybody else, I don't know if you have other thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's a great summation of like what the project or the podcast is. And it's also one of those things where it becomes like, to me, the podcast is also as much about like really being able to chart out a lineage and legacy of Black art that I don't think that we get to talk about really in America a lot, right? The purpose of Black art in America seems to be to forget about it, and someone new has to come along to really reinvent like the wheel, right? At every turn, it's like, oh, this playwright is doing a new thing. When actually, right, there is a long history and tradition that playwright is coming from and working in and working through. And how do we help Black playwrights like center themselves in that tradition and really see that tradition, so that one, they don't have to bear like the burden of being the first one to do it, because it's not true, but also by allowing them to know the sort of legacies they're coming from and working in and working through, in the same way that like white playwrights get to point to Miller and Williams, right? That legacy becomes an important thing. And that's a really fun and exciting thing about the podcast of like Black minstrelsy, or like what is Black experimental theater? How do these things work, and what are they doing, and what do they mean to us today?
I think a phrase that really stuck with me in doing this is the idea of not needing to reinvent the wheel. Basically just hopping on to what Dominique just said. We're at minstrelsy, which is what we're looking at right now. We've been talking a lot about these Black men who owned their own troops, or created or left other white troops in order to say, I want to center my own voice. And I never thought about that time period as having that narrative and that paradigm. And that's really shifted my own. And like, I don't have to recreate something. And when I'm trying to figure out how to operate within American theater today, I'm not starting from scratch. I have other people that have done it before that I can look on, which is basically exactly what Dominique said. I'm just yes-anding.
It's so good. Actually, and I think it's such a beautiful point about what it means for us to not have to reinvent the wheel. I actually, if Arminda doesn't mind me tossing it over to her, just this sense, I think just because of so much of your work and so much of AJ's work is about just understanding the scope and the legacy of Black art and Black artists. I think for both of you, Arminda and AJ, and if you could talk about, what that means to kind of to be able to stand on the shoulders of the people who have done this work before us, and also what that means in terms of what we're building.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start with kind of the personal journey story, which is, you know, like a lot of people, I went to college and studied theater, and then I went to graduate school and majored in and got a what do you call it? Got an MFA in dramaturgy, and you know, and supposedly knew some things about theater, and then a little detour took me into work as a kind of makeshift archivist for Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, who were playwrights and actors and activists and fairly well known. And they had a lot of stuff in their basement that they needed someone to sort through. And that's where I learned about Black theater. Like, I had gone through the entire educational system that you can go through and knew nothing. I didn't know. I discovered Alice Childress in a basement. I discovered the work of the Negro Ensemble Company in a basement. I discovered the American Negro Theater in a basement. I just didn't know anything. I discovered Pearlie Victorious in a basement, though I knew about Pearlie. I mean, I didn't know anything. And, you know, in theory, I was supposed to know lots of things. So, and it was amazing. Okay, it was amazing. It was a great discovery, but just realizing that there is a history, and it didn't start, you know, and it didn't start in the 80s, and it didn't start in the 60s, and it didn't start in the 40s, that you can go back and back and back and have it. I think it's just digging into history, because I love the rabbit hole. Some people do. Some people, you know, like to, you know, I've been deep diving in, and just to find out how much information before has been incomplete or slightly flawed or false, and how to like get a story right. Or as close to right as you can get a story that's 100 years old, has been, I think, the most challenging and interesting part of my journey right now. Is every time I go, I probably don't need to know anything more. I've probably researched this too much. We're probably ready to finally go and go, oh, that whole scholarship that I was building this on is flawed in this way, and now I see it, and now we can not make that mistake or perpetuate that mistake. We can, you know, we can clean it up so that it can be helpful in a new way. That's kind of what's bringing me joy, as we like to say. That is the thing that's bringing me joy right now in CLASSIX. And I will pass that on to AJ.
So just to piggyback on to what everybody else was saying, I think that I came into Black theater probably when I was an undergraduate student at NYU in the mid-90s. And I remember taking an African-American drama class taught by a woman named Professor Yvette Lewis. And she taught us about, you know, Adrienne Kennedy, Amiri Baraka, like, you know, the iconic Black playwrights. So I got to read those plays many, many years ago. And then I think they just all kind of just percolated in my brain. And at that time, I had, when I was a student at NYU, my former supervisor had taken me to see a show at the Public Theater by a playwright Eugene Lee, and that just blew my mind. So I just spent like the next 20 years devoted to you know, absorbing as much Black theater as I could. You know, reading about it, and also just actually, you know, seeing these productions in New York City. So this getting to work on CLASSIX, it's just brought together my love of working in libraries, research, and just, you know, even though I took this Black theater class like 25 years ago, it wasn't until I would say the past 5 years in working at the Schomburg Center in being able to make the connection about, you know, the lineage of Black playwrights and movements, and really begin to understand what these, you know, like what the movements meant, and who came out of the movement, and how, you know, and just realizing how much the larger institution has really not, like has not really, built a bridge for us. So oftentimes in the Black theater community, as Dominique was saying, we don't, we don't realize that there are artists who are still alive and, who have been doing the work. And, working on CLASSIX is just kind of, come full circle for me, because I get to see how all of these different pieces fit together, and to really like go in depth in a way that I really had not done previously. So I just really appreciate being, working on this project with Awoye, Arminda, Dominique, and Brittany, and just creating this creating this platform so that students will have access to this platform, and we, like we're sharing what we learn to students, and we just hope that this project will be something that students can use, researchers, lifelong learners, so that although the wider industry has kind of erased like the Black theater canon is still alive, and it's up to us as cultural workers and creators to keep the legacy alive. And I just encourage students, to remind you that in addition to what you learn in class, your education is also going to be about what you don't learn, and what you're going to have to learn on your own, and learn from your peers and learn from your elders. So yeah, I know I was rambling, so sorry about that.
Can I just ask a clarification question? So Awoye, you said before that starting tomorrow, there's going to be some bios launching. Is that kind of like the Kathleen Collins, Bill Gunn pages, like more pages like that? Is that what you mean?
So we are ultimately going to build out the catalog to feature all of those pages. But as a starting point on Instagram for the month of October, each day we're going to feature one artist. So we'll have kind of a photo of the person and a short biography so that people can learn about other writers. There'll be 31 writers featured over the course of October. And then ultimately all of that information, larger bios, larger information about the play will all be featured on the website. That will roll out a little bit later, but this is kind of like us just planting a nice seed for what the catalog will ultimately become.
And when will the podcasts go up?
Ooh, this is a good question. So here's what happens, Jonathan. We are deep into the research mode of this right now. Our goal is to have the first, we're calling them acts, the first act on minstrelsy come out before the end of the year. So what I would encourage everybody to do is go on the website and sign up for the mailing list. And we will, when it's time to launch the podcast, we will send an email out to everybody so that they can listen to it, and it'll be available on all the podcast platforms, but something to look forward to in the next couple months.
So just a question that comes to mind from hearing all of you talk. So I'm getting a little sense of how you all collaborate, but how is it decided that someone is chosen for inclusion? An artist is chosen for inclusion? Because you started by saying the Black classical canon beyond Lorraine Hansberry and August Wilson. Well, okay, so that's everybody but two people. Like, how are the decisions made?
Yeah, no, this is such a great question. So pretty early on, one of the things that we thought about was like actually what defines a classic, right? And our kind of large definition of what makes a classic is a piece that speaks to the time that it was written, but also resonates deeply with our own time. And I think it gives us actually a lot of room for examination, because it means that there's a lot of plays that might fit into that category. But really, it's about how does the play speak to us now? If that's how that's how we define a classic. The beautiful thing, I think, for us inside of the exploration is really looking at the plays and seeing which plays actually do speak to this moment. And it also means that the definition of a classic will be kind of rolling. A piece that really resonates with us right now in 2020 might be different than a piece that's going to resonate with us in 2030. So it's really about looking at our full archive of plays and of writers and seeing what are the plays that speak to us now. And I think we think about that when we think about new plays as well, right? How does it speak to us today in terms of what is making us decide to produce it or examine it or investigate it or share it. And then the other kind of general criteria that we're using, which I say is actually a little bit more arbitrary, but is that we're looking at plays written before 1990. And those are our kind of like terms and stipulations. I will toss it to the others and think about, how do you think about how we define a classic play?
This is totally not to answer it, but just to say that there's a question in the Q&A like that I think is probably right in line with this conversation. That is what your thoughts on the importance of storytelling and particularly the importance of Black storytelling is. So I just want to say to Tremaine that this is like part of that conversation of what is storytelling and what is Black storytelling. I think storytelling in general is something that we have in our culture as human beings. I don't come from a family of artists per se, but I come from a family of storytellers. But on top of that, what is the public storytelling? What are we putting value on? What are we putting on stages and on screens? Because that's part of the conversation that we're having with one another culturally as a society. And when Black stories aren't valued, it's essentially saying that Black lives aren't valued, indirectly or directly, basically. And being able to have a lot of these classic plays that were going on and are relevant now, I think it helps us value the people in our culture and society, and it allows us to have a better conversation about what's actually happening in the world.
So it's interesting to me that it sounds like you are making a judgment call on these works. You say that you think speak to the current moment. Did I understand you right? That the works that you're putting in front of people are works that you think really deserve to be produced today and read and taught?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think that part of what our work is actually not about not necessarily about putting stamps or not necessarily about finding answers. It's really about leading with the question of what is a classic play? What is our classical canon? What is the tradition that we come from? How is that tradition being examined by contemporary writers today? It's really about making links and about asking questions about who we are, where we come from, what our traditions are, what our dreams are, what the hopes are, and how those are articulated by different artists through time. But certainly there are plays that resonate with us or that we do think that speak to the present moment. But our investigation is about the question, how does it resonate with us today? Does it resonate with us today? Is I think our guidepost.
Can I just, our audience is new to this, and I just want to explain that there were two past activities of CLASSIX. One was a series was it the Siegel Center, Awoye?
Yep, that's right.
Which is also part of CUNY. I think it was readings. But then there was something that was much more like a staged reading at Theater for a New Audience of an Alice Childress play called Wedding Band. And that was an extraordinary event, which led to the artistic director saying, I want to produce this play. How was that chosen for, how was that particular play chosen for that? Because, that kind of launched the collaboration with Tafana.
Yeah, shall I take that? Arminda, you want to take that one?
This is where I remember where the unmute is. Part of that is that I have how you just fall in love with people for a while. I've like been in love with Alice Childress for the past 3 years. And so I think the first thing I said to Awoye when, when I met her in person, because we'd been talking around the project we were doing. But I think that I walked up to her when I met her and I said something. I said, right now I'm just obsessed with Alice Childress. I'm going to try to, I mean, which apparently was the right thing to say to her. And I did not know that, but it was the right thing to say. Part of it is the experience of being in the Davis's basement for a number of years, because Ruby Dee was in the first 4 productions of Wedding Band, which was a play that I'd never heard of. And so I, you know, in archiving it, I got to read it and see all of this stuff. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool play. And then I was working with the organization called Going to the River for the festival with Elizabeth Van Dyke. And we did a staged reading of what, well, not a stage reading, we did a reading of Wedding Band. And listening to it, I was just blown away. And then I, for a couple of reasons, did a couple of other small things with a couple of Alice Childress pieces. And each time I encountered the work with people reading it, I was blown away. And so I was trying to understand how I did not know this, how I didn't know this writer, because she has a body of work that says I should know who she is. That, I mean, it's just, it was insane to me. And so that was part of the conversation that I brought to Awoye. And so I've been kind of an acolyte and proselytizer, and in our meeting, in our monthly meetings, because for a while we could only meet once a month or once every 2 months, I would have, you know, like those people who just can't, who every conversation eventually comes back to, every conversation eventually came back to Alice Childress. So when we were trying to talk about what to do for Tavana, I didn't say anything about Alice Childress because I thought I'm talking too much now. I just, let me leave it alone and think about other people that we could do. And Awoye called and said, well, I think it should be Alice Childress. So my work was complete, my life, you know, and then talking about which play, and the 2 larger pieces that come to mind are Trouble in Mind and Wedding Band. And there was a thought about Trouble in Mind, but I have a particular, and not just because of the basement, but just having heard it, a particular passion for Wedding Band. I feel like it is, that Trouble in Mind is a wonderful play, particularly for creative people, particularly for actors. And it focuses on—
It's about an actor.
It's about actors. It's about the theatrical process, and that's always going to be very popular with actors and directors and producers and dramaturgs. We're always going to love that. But that there is something that is just so viscerally powerful about Wedding Band, and that it is, you know, really trying to dig into to common experience, and I mean that in just like the general, and also the, you know, the everyday human being trying to like live their lives. And so I thought that, I just think that's such a powerful piece. And I read some things that didn't seem to understand that, and I wanted to re-examine it. I really wanted to have it heard in a way that could make that statement. That is just, you know.
Should we take some questions here, since we're reaching the last quarter of the hour? What do you think? Should we open it up to some questions?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Okay. So Tremaine, I don't know if you all feel as though Tremaine's question has been answered. What are your thoughts on the importance of storytelling, and particularly the importance of Black storytelling? Brittany just talked about that. If anybody else has anything to say, I'll just give a moment to that. If not, we have another question from one of my colleagues.
Yeah, first, what's up, Tremaine? It's so good that you're here. It's good to see your name. I think the importance of storytelling is storytelling is important because, right, I'm thinking about the history of imperialism and colonialization, right? That if you cannot tell your stories, someone else will tell it for you. And so there is something very important to me, particularly about Black storytelling, that we are able and trying and grappling with the ways in which our subjection happens and is so everyday and is so, you know, regular, schmegular to the creation of this country, of the West, of the world. And so to me, the importance of Black storytelling and the reason it's so important is because it allows us to attempt to put a grammar to our experiences and like the negation of our existence, right? And in that way, and I think that's what's so important about like the CLASSIX project is like, you read an Alice Childress play and you're like, oh, Jackie Sippet's jewelry is in here, right? That like there is a linkage between these two people that is spanning generations, and that both of them being able to articulate and name what they're experiencing in real time and their time and their space feels like an attempt to really sort of point towards the problems of the American empire, right? And name those inequities and like the problems there. So for me, Black storytelling is able to like is a tool that we are using to name like our subjection, but also to like talk about, even in the midst of the terror we are experiencing, the joys that we can find.
There's also something about, when you say that, Dominique, it makes me think of I'm trying to think of the right words for it, the ways in which Black culture has been stolen, mm-hmm. maybe, and not given credit where credit is due. For a small example, we're talking about Bob Cole for Minstrelsy, and Bob Cole at one time had a whiteface character called the Tramp, which basically is in direct lineage to Charlie Chaplin. But when we talk about, you know, the lineage of Charlie Chaplin and all the people that came after him, it stops at Charlie Chaplin, and as if Charlie created it, when it actually goes back like 50 more years, 100 more years. And that's a way of stealing the identity and Black storytelling and reclaiming the narrative in a negative way. And what this does is just allow the history to be told correctly. And also with some of the people that we have chosen, I know, Jonathan, you asked that question, I think it helps do some deep dives and rabbit holes specifically for students, because it's hard sometimes to know where to start in this research. Like, it's hard. I felt like it was hard when I was in school to be like, I want to know so much about Black culture and Black history. I want to know about Black theater. I want to study these plays. And if my school isn't doing it, how do I at least bring it into scene study? How do I produce it on my own? But I didn't know the people. I didn't know where to start. And at least with highlighting some of these people, you can kind of deep dive and say, okay, let me go into Alice Childress and see all of her plays and see who inspired her. Or let me go and look at Bill Gunn. So it's the lineage is just really important to me, and I just wanted to lay that out there.
Okay, shall I move on here? There's a comment and a question from my colleague Deepsika Chatterjee, who teaches costume history and costume design in our department, and she's asking if you know a designer who's does Instagram and Facebook under the name Bridging the Gap, because this is someone who researches and posts about Black style, Black hair, Black clothing. Anybody? Bridging the Gap?
No, I don't know. I've never heard of them. I can't wait to check them out. But I also find it so fascinating because it connects to the thing that we're all talking about, which is about us as Black people, as Black artists, kind of looking at our legacy, you know, and looking at the styles that came before, looking at the traditions that came before, and seeing how they manifest in the contemporary world, or how we can kind of take something that is ancient and put a little bit of contemporary spin on it as we're kind of exploring our own artistry. So I love that. It makes perfect sense, and exactly as everybody is saying, it's like she's doing with hair and clothing and style what we are doing with theater, which is like looking all the way back and celebrating the beautiful history, and celebrating the people who have been celebrating the history for forever, people who have been trying to maintain it. So I feel like it's so exciting.
I guess we'll all look it up. So thank you for that, Deeps. Yeah. So there's two more questions from Tremaine. Let me come back to Tremaine since Tremaine's already asked a question. I'll come back. Namuna, I'm so curious how long you have been working on creating CLASSIX, how you raised money to get to this point, and if there's anyone else helping y'all, or if this group is the core group creating this amazing organization. And I'm sure many other BIPOC folks, I'm also trying to create an organization for us, by us, and would love to know how the process has been so far.
I just want to say, hey, Namona.
Yeah, no, it's really been it's been amazing. You know, it's funny. I think one of the things that I have learned over my many years is you know, I think when I was kind of first starting out as a director and as a producer, because I had a company before, and there was so much work that I was doing on my own, you know. And I think the beautiful thing, I feel like in my own kind of learning and process has been about saying, oh, what does it really mean to kind of gather like minds together so that we can do a thing together, we can build a thing together, we can dream about a thing together. And I think the really beautiful thing about our group is that everybody's kind of coming from, everybody has a different kind of background, a different perspective, a different sense of how things should be, but there's a place in the middle that all of us kind of meet. So like having this kind of, these, as you can see, these kind of masterminds for us all to be kind of in circulation together, for me is so thrilling and so exciting. One of the things in terms of the fundraising is, you know, it's a part where we're definitely kind of evolving that part of the work that we do and looking for more kind of grant opportunities. But one of the things that we've done so far is actually partner with other organizations. So when we were doing the first reading at the Siegel Center in 2017, it was really about talking to, you know, I had a relationship with the person who runs that organization, and we said, oh, what kind of thing could we work on together? And he, Frank Henschker, who's just an amazing curator, said, oh, let's do this here. So we found a partnership with Theater for a New Audience in the readings. You know, I had a conversation with Jeffrey Horowitz, who runs Theater for a New Audience, and it's like there's that term in critical race theory about interest convergence, and really what we've been doing has been finding partners who have that kind of an interest convergence of the thing that we want to do is actually also the thing that they want to do, and they've had an infrastructure for funding. So that's where our partnerships have kind of lay so far, and the next step for us is going to be about continuing to harness resources from other places.
Okay, here's a question from Jeffrey. How can Afro, Latinx, and other non-BIPOC folks, not sure why it says non, contribute into raising awareness of getting CLASSIX works by BIPOC artists out there so that we are more inclusive? That's what
I'm going to guess that when Jeffrey says non-BIPOC, he means they mean white people, because that's the only thing that I think makes sense to me. And I think that maybe the first step, I'll just take like the first part. I think the first step is actually maybe getting rid of the idea of inclusion and like not having that be a central goal for anything, right? Because what inclusion means is that for someone to be included on the inside, there must be an outside. And so how can we, right, fundamentally get rid of that idea, get rid of the idea of the inside so that we are producing things? Then it really is a question of producing, I think, like before it is anything else. You can have as many artists of color coming to a table as you want, but if we're keeping the same producing methods that have been around since like Broadway became like capitalist death machines, then we are going to continue seeing sort of the same lack, right? So I think at once it needs to be a real look at the infrastructure of like a producing organizations, and also like figuring out how to get rid of the wealth disparity between like independent producers and producing organizations. And then it just needs to be a consideration of like, what are we doing? Why is it that like for the past 50 years, this place has only been producing white plays? What makes white plays that good, right? Like, cause I promise you, I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure that out for myself. And so, right, it's a consideration of like, how have we been producing things? What are the necessary steps we need to change to really rethink producing and the way we've been producing things as a whole? I think one big thing is that for producing organizations to really work on rethinking their budgets. Like I feel like for a lot of producing orgs, they have the same budget itineraries for everything. And that encloses, right, on the imagination. And so if we really get to a place where like there is budget flexibility, hashtag decolonize your budgets, then we might be able to move to a place where like we are able to see these plays fully rounded, fully developed, right? And folks of color don't have to spend their time in like development hell and are actually able to like get produced in a way that like is equitable and makes sense for what they're doing.
Yeah, I think I know Jeffrey. Hi, Jeffrey. This is an issue with all with the language we use to talk a lot of things. We have language like the word ethnic, that splits people into an in-group and an out-group. And this is a problem. We need to find other language to talk about who is in and who is out, so that we're not always speaking as though there's an out group and an in group. This is a long-term problem. So anyway, there is another question by an anonymous attendee. Where do you see Black storytelling and theater in the future in relation to the new movements that have sparked this year? Using Broadway as an example, on the one hand, there are new up and coming producers who are supporting new works, but at the same time, so many theater companies and organizations have completely avoided taking action alongside their fluffed up statements, as pointed out by We See You, White American Theater. What are your thoughts?
Well, can I answer
with the heat?
Oh, this is a good one for AJ. Go ahead, AJ.
Well, but I was just, hopefully my connection won't go out, but what I would say is that working with an organization like the Fire This Time Festival, which is an 11-year-old organization and was started by a Black woman playwright to, to give emerging and underrepresented playwrights from the African diaspora a platform. There are dozens of organizations that were founded by Black artists, Latino, Latinx artists, and Asian American artists, and Native American artists, Indigenous artists. So our organizations have been doing the work, all along. So what I would say is that really, since we're not in control of what goes on at the predominantly white institutions, and we don't know, like I can't comment about what decisions their artistic directors are going to make in terms of ensuring that there will be seasons that are really representative of, for example, if you live in New York City, I can't control what Oscar Eustace is going to do, but I would say that there are the organizations like Fire This Time Festival, like Emerindia, we've been doing the work all along. So I would just, and our organizations are committed to doing this work. So so I would say that you may want to look at the organizations like the New Federal Theaters, the Boundless Theater Companies, Intar or Pregones, Mayi, Pan Asian Rep, to look at these institutions and see what these institutions are doing and what stories they're telling, and just continue to support these organizations, because without your support and the support of our communities, we really wouldn't exist. So so I just would say the focus should be put on how can the organizations that are doing the work, how can we have more resources, as one of my coworkers would say, to build a bigger table, as opposed to looking at the PWIs and what they're going to do, because we've seen these cycles of boom and bust over the past 40 and 50 years, where one moment playwrights of color are hot, and then, as someone else I know said, then it's another dry white season for the next 10 years. But then on the other hand, you have this whole you have this whole other world of people who are people of color, artists, and Black artists who've been on the ground doing the work.
I also...
I'm getting the high sign from my control room here that it's 2 o'clock and we need to wrap up, but I want to give you guys a chance to, offer some closing thoughts to at least the public part of this meeting.
Yeah, well, I'll leave it with Brittany to finish out your thought. I think it'll do.
No, well, I was just going to say I hope I'm getting this right. The Asian American Performers Action Coalition, which has been doing absolutely incredible work and deserves, like, all of the things, put out different studies and stats about representation, about where money is going at a lot of PWIs, but just in general, when we're looking at what is being produced and what is not being produced. And I think it's really helpful in this time period that we're in, where theater isn't really being created. There's a time for knowing and there's a time for growing, right? This is really a time to know and to really delve into, where have I been spending my money before? Is that a place that I should be continuing to support? If that's a yes, then how can I make sure that the things that I believe in or that my viewpoint is also being expressed? If that's a no, how do I make sure that I'm supporting a lot of these other companies, like what AJ has brought up, that are doing the groundwork? That's part of, creating the society that we want to live in. And that's something that we can all do right now, especially when theater is basically at a standstill and change can actually happen.
Okay. Awoye, you want the last word?
No, I think it's so beautiful. And, I think so much of this, this endeavor, as you can see, kind of fits with so much of just our kind of own thinking and philosophy. And so much of that, I think, is about kind of shattering illusions, and reclaiming our own reality, because the cultural lens that we, I think, especially for folks who did not go to HBCUs, about our own history, about our own philosophies, it's reclaiming our own history and knowing of ourself. And we are doing that through the plays, through the playwrights. Our understanding of that history is about a reclamation of the greatness and the power of Blackness and of Black art in this country and also around the world. So it's about a reframing of a cultural lens that is also a part of what our project and endeavor is. And it's really exciting, the fact that the things that we also, in the doing of it, are learning about ourselves is the extraordinary thing, which just makes it just such a beautiful art project. It's doing the things that art is here to do.
Wow. Well, the only thing that remains is for me to say thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you for this fantastic discussion. Thank you for bringing this idea, this organization to our attention. It's so valuable and wonderful to have had you. So thank you. We are now going to sign off, and we're going to sign on with the faculty at a different address. So we will say goodbye to our audience, and
one more thing, Jonathan.
We'll see you in a few minutes.
One more thing, Jonathan, just for everybody, if you have any questions or if you want to reach out to us, you can go to the website. There's a link to send us an email, but just feel free to engage with us with any questions that you've got. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.